What up, childrens? Old man shouting at clouds. So, topic of today's conversation is perspective. I think this is a very important one that, I may have touched on in other videos, but we're going to dedicate some time to this one because I think it's critically important. It's a very important life lesson, and it's something that doesn't get discussed nearly enough, but in a very real sense, your perspective is your reality. And that might sound like a crazy thing to say at first because you're like, well, no, things happen, right? Objectively, good and bad things happen. So, how can my perspective be the reality? Like, the reality is the reality, not my perspective. Yes and no. So, in reality, you do see the things you're looking for. Now, that might sound like the world's most obvious comment, but I promise you it isn't. There's something there. If you're looking for bad things or you're looking for good things, you're going to find them. And often you're going to find both, right? The world is always elements of good and bad. So a perfect example would be there are a lot of people right now here in the US that are hearing a lot of doom and gloom stories. And again, not to say that that information is inherently incorrect, but they're hearing a ton of that. And so their outlook on the United States and on the world is not very positive. Meanwhile, at the same time, I'd be willing to bet that fewer people are dying of starvation and disease than did 20 years ago or 50 years ago. So, which is it? Is the world a better place or is it a worse place? Well, the answer is it depends on your perspective. It depends on what you're consuming. Are you consuming a lot of doom and gloom media? Are you consuming the opposite? Are you consuming only positive feel-good stories? Depending on which one you're consuming, you might think the world is a very different place. Now, what I'm not recommending, and I want to be clear about that up front, is that you have this kind of like Pollyanna view on the world where it's always sunshine and rainbows, or that you have a super Debbie Downer opinion of the world and all you consume is bad stuff, and so you think the world's a terrible place. What I would encourage you to do is make sure that you're aware of both, right? So if you find yourself in a doom scroll kind of world where you've been seeing a lot of reels, or you've been seeing a lot of shorts on YouTube, or you've been watching a lot of videos, or seeing a lot of news, and everything you're seeing is very one-sided. So it's either like super the world is sunshine and rainbows, or it's super the world is doom and gloom. I would encourage you to seek out sources that are saying the opposite, because you'll find them. They're out there. There are always good stories that are uplifting, and you can find them if you look for them. And there are always also stories that'll bring you back down to earth a little bit if you get too, you're seeing the world through just rose-colored glasses. And the reason why I think it's important to do both is because there are real problems, and those real problems deserve our attention and more importantly, our action, okay? We can't fix problems if we don't know they're there. We can't make the world a better place if we don't know areas in which we're struggling. We can do those things if we're aware of what the issues are. So it is important to know what the problems are so we can work towards fixing them. It's not important to know what the problems are so we can just sit there and dwell on it and be miserable and, oh, the world's going to hell. There's no point in trying. Like, those are super unproductive attitudes to have. And it's really, if that's the way if that's going to ultimately be your takeaway, then it probably would just be better to live in an ignorance is bliss life of thinking everything is sunshine and rainbows, because at least then you wouldn't be toxic to be around. But if you're consuming the stories that maybe don't sound as positive but are pointing out legitimate issues, and you're consuming them from the perspective of, okay, so how do we solve this problem? How do we make an impact? How do we make the world better? If you're consuming the stories about SNAP benefits being cut off, for example, from the perspective of, okay, how do I help out in my local community to help bridge the gap for people that really need the assistance? Then yes, like by all means, let's be aware of the issues so that we can take action and begin to address them. On the other side, I do think it's important to maintain hope and maintain positivity. So if all you're seeing is the doom and gloom stories, I'd encourage you to go out and look up some really positive stories to counterbalance that and find some examples of people who are making a difference in the world, who are making it a better place. Because if you see them doing it, right? If one other person has done it, then you know it's possible and we can do it. And that should encourage you. That should motivate you to say, okay, if that person did it, so can I. I can also make a difference. And the more of us that adopt that kind of mindset, the more of us begin working on solving these problems, the more likely is somebody's going to find an answer. That's why this stuff matters, and that's how perspective, which seems like an abstract concept, can really become something tangible and real. It is, if enough of us believe it and we start working towards it, somebody's probably going to figure out an answer that works, or at least moves the ball down the field, right? At least it makes progress towards a goal. And so that's how perspective becomes reality. And that's why it's so important, right? If your perspective is that the world is an inherently negative place and bad things just happen and there's nothing you can do about it, that's not a very empowering message. And that's not a message that's likely to motivate you or those around you to dare mighty things, right? To attempt things that, even though they may be difficult, it doesn't stop you from trying. And again, even if you aren't the one who finds the answer, but you move us a little bit closer, and then somebody takes off from where you left off and they find the answer, you were still an instrumental part of that happening. And I refuse to believe that any of the problems we have today can't be solved, okay? World War I, World War II, the Civil War, these things all seemed like insurmountable issues, and yet here we stand today, having gotten past them. Not to say there wasn't a lot of suffering, not to say that the road wasn't very difficult, but we made it. We came out the other side. So whatever problems we're facing today, I have a feeling they're solvable. And most importantly, we have yet to find an issue that humanity couldn't solve when motivated to solve it. So we need to hold ourselves accountable, and we need to maintain perspective, right? The world is never all good or all bad. The world is what we make it. So I hope this conversation helped. Not one of my longer ones, but I think it's an important one. Maybe this is just a starting point on a topic we'll have to delve into a little bit more deeply, but I hope it helped. I love you very much. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.